You are listening to the Slow Living Podcast, and I'm your host, Stephanie O'Day. What if I told you that you could truly have the life of your dreams, the life you've always wanted, one filled with abundance, joy, and a sense of purpose? It's absolutely possible, and I see it each and every day with my coaching clients. It all starts with learning how to slow down. You deserve to live the life you've always dreamt about. Let's get started. So if you're a fan of the podcast, you're going to absolutely love the book. Slow Living, Cultivating a Life of Purpose in a Hustle-Driven World is now available wherever books are sold. Buy it for yourself, your children, your friends, and your neighbors. You can get all the juicy details at stephanieoday.com/slow living book. Trust me, this is hands down the best $20 you'll ever spend. Hi there, Slow Down Society. Steph here, and we are on episode 153 of the Slow Living Podcast. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. I think you're amazing and kind and wonderful and lovely. And today we are going to wrap up our slow parenting series. I'm going to have all of the different links for the different topics that in the show notes. I had a very early on episode on slow parenting when I first started the podcast. And then we had a more concise topic series. We had the newborn years. We definitely talked about teens and tweens. We talked about school age readiness. Today, to wrap it up, we're going to talk about adult children. And we're also going to talk about estrangement. And estrangement is coming up an awful lot in my coaching calls. And it's interesting now. I've been coaching long enough that I have heard from both sides, not both sides of the same family, because that wouldn't be appropriate. But I am most certainly not a marriage and family counselor or therapist. I'm a coach, which means that I help you meet and exceed your goals in a slow, steady, and sustainable way. But it's not therapy. If you still have a lot of stuff to unpack and work through, I highly recommend therapy. And today we're going to talk about adult children and the possibility of estrangement and the idea that at some point these little baby beings that you're raising might not like you. And coming to terms with that. And then maybe some tips and tricks to help keep that from happening. As far as me seeing and hearing things from both sides, because I've been coaching for so long, usually what happens is someone feels that they are in their kind of late 20s, early 30s, and they're having a truncated adulthood. They don't feel super very adulty, and they're having a hard time making forward traction. I did record a podcast, not last one, I think it was the one before, on recognizing a quarter life and a midlife crisis. So maybe that kind of quarter life crisis times, some people take stock of their own childhood and they start looking back at things. And for many, that's the first time that they decide to go to therapy and kind of unpack their childhood. And that, for some parents, can be really difficult to know that their children are in therapy, because they then start to have the idea that they were bad parents, or their kids think all of their issues and problems are their parents' fault. And one of the big things about raising adult children and kind of creating these future adults, regardless of how little and young your kids are, you're still trying to raise future healthy, sustainable adults. The idea that they might not need you or even want you or like you anymore as they adult up and become their own person can really be heavy for a lot of people. And I want you to really kind of think about that and play some what if scenarios and maybe journal it out. What if um, this toddler that you're bouncing on your knee right now, what if that toddler grows up and doesn't like you and doesn't want to be around you? Um, I want you to just kind of play it out and think it through and do some journaling, um, because that happens. And I don't want it to be completely and totally devastating for you because I want you to have an identity outside of your children. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today and help kind of ward some things off and then also come to terms with the idea that maybe not everybody likes you and maybe you did make some mistakes and maybe there's some apologizing to do. Um okay, so let's see. So estrangement happens when a particular family member cuts off another family member. Sometimes the kind of psychobabble terms are no contact, and online that goes by NC, or low contact, which is LC, or VLC, which is very low contact. Um, and sometimes you, as an adult, you very well may have needed to do this to other people in your life already. And maybe you didn't even know that you created these boundaries for yourself to protect yourself and didn't realize like, oh, I'm low contact with my uncle because he's a little creepy. Great. So you already kind of know what that means to protect yourself. So if a child decides after they are a full-fledged grown-up to go low contact with their parents, usually it's not just one thing. There's usually a lot of little things that have kind of layered up along the way. And in order to help ward that off, and again, I'm just Steph. I'm your friendly neighborhood lady next door who is going to talk to you and love on you. And I will think you are wonderful no matter what. But if something like this has happened, it's time really to go within and start asking yourself some really good questions on how this happened, why it happened, and probably you'll need to go to some therapy yourself to kind of have someone say, "Oh yeah, so see what you just said here. That's something that maybe your child is listening to and thinking that you're judgmental or you're coming across in not a very healthy way." We are in a situation now where everyone has a computer in their back pocket, and so the amount of research that one, you can do, and two, your children can do of what's normal, what's healthy, does this sound right, is astronomical. And instead of shying away from that, it's an opportunity for you as the parent to do better. Children used to be stuck. We've all seen plenty of movies and TV shows where the kids never leave their own small town because they don't know that there's anything bigger and better out there. But now everybody does. Everyone has the opportunity to, one, Google, and then two, to see how it could be in other people's homes and other people's lives. And yes, what is shown on social media and on websites is kind of the highlight reel. It's the glossy, shiny, happy family, which in real life, everyone has warts. Everyone has scars. Everyone has blemishes that they wish they didn't. But in a healthy family, those hurts, those those warts, those blemishes are healed and soothed before they become well-worn scars. I'm going to read you 4 different paragraphs on different type of parents that have been deemed not super very healthy. And I've spoken about this book before. It's a fantastic book. And it's The Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents: How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents. And it's written by Lindsay C. Gibson. And she's a clinical psychologist and author. Once you know these 4 types of parents, you can, one, sort of pinpoint like, oh yeah, I was definitely raised in that kind of umbrella, or, oh yeah, actually, I had a really hard time in the last 6 months or so because my own mom died, and so I can see that I didn't handle it well, and I actually probably need to go back and do some apologizing to my children for the way that I acted and reacted. Okay. Also, one thing that's really fun and interesting, and we'll talk about this after I read these paragraphs, is once you know these kind of parents, then you can see them everywhere. And I like to watch television shows and kind of pinpoint, like, see what you're doing here. Okay. So this is page 70 of The Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay C. Gibson. Emotional parents are run by their feelings, swinging between over-involvement and abrupt withdrawal. They are prone to frightening instability and unpredictability. Overwhelmed by anxiety, they rely on others to stabilize them. They treat small upsets like the end of the world and see other people as either rescuers or abandoners. Driven parents are compulsively goal-oriented and super busy. They can't stop trying to perfect everything, including other people. Although they rarely pause long enough to have true empathy for their children, they are controlling and interfering when it comes to running their children's lives. Passive parents have a laissez-faire mindset and avoid dealing with anything upsetting. They're less obviously harmful than other types, but have their own negative effects. They readily take a back seat to a dominant mate, even allowing abuse and neglect to occur by looking the other way. They cope by minimizing problems and acquiescing. Rejecting parents engage in a range of behaviors that make you wonder why they have a family in the first place. Whether their behavior is mild or severe, they don't enjoy emotional intimacy and clearly don't want to be bothered by children. Their tolerance for other people's needs is practically nil, and their interactions consist of issuing commands, blowing up, or isolating themselves from family life. Some of the milder types may engage in stereotypical family activities, but they still show little closeness or real engagement. They mostly want to be left alone to do their own thing. Now, okay, so the 4 types are emotional parents, driven parents, passive parents, or rejecting parents. And according to Lindsay C. Gibson, who's a clinical psychologist and author, those types of parents are considered emotionally immature if they are that way most of the time, not some of the time, not because they personally are going through a difficult time period, but overall, over and over and over again. That's when the wounds become so deep that they can't heal. And that's when sometimes some kids grow up, do their own research, and think, yeah, I kind of, for my own mental health and well-being, I would rather disengage. And that's how estrangement happens. Okay, so if you can see yourself or your own parents in that way, what can you do about it? Start apologizing, probably, and realize that you're a human and humans make mistakes. A heartfelt apology goes a very long way. And there's a difference between an apology and making excuses. Because even if you were having a hard time, maybe you were going through a divorce and you were wrapped up in yourself for a really long time. Um, Maybe your own mental health wasn't the best and you lashed out. Maybe instead of dealing with the demons in your brain, you turned to coping strategies that were unhealthy, such as drugs, alcohol, um, and a bit of neglect, emotional neglect. Children need their parents um, for a very long time. We're not sea turtles, and we don't just kind of hatch out of the shell and climb out. Um, there's a lot of studies about attachment theory and the children's biological needs to be taken care of. And little things over time, such as a child coming to you in the middle of the night because he or she had a nightmare, and perhaps maybe you weren't super crazy empathetic because you were super crazy tired and you had to get up early the next day. And maybe you sort of shoved them aside and let them deal with their own nightmare. Here and there, okay. But on a continuous basis, if something like that happens over time, the child is going to conceptualize that his or her needs are not met. And so then they'll stop asking for help. And so that is the opposite of a highly attached child and attachment theory. That is a child realizing, oh, okay, when I ask for help, I'm not going to be given help. So I'm just going to stop asking for help. And a lot of times that's how estrangement happens. So I spoke earlier about uh, television shows. So growing up, I was born in 76. So the late 80s, maybe mid 80s to about mid 90s were filled with families on TV. And I spent a lot of time as a child watching that because those were really the television shows that were on TV. What's fun for me now is to watch them again with adult eyes and adult kind of ideas and the wherewithal that I can see sometimes what writers were going for the quick laugh and the low hanging fruit joke. But now that I'm older, it's really interesting to pay attention to that. So I'll just throw out a few TV shows that really bother me now as an adult. But at the time I thought they were funny. Malcolm in the Middle, um, the mom, Lois, to me now is unwatchable. Um, the way she treats her children, how just inept she is to handle problems on her own without blaming and shaming everyone around her. To me, is very triggering, and I don't like to watch that show, even though my kids here and there will put it on and they think it's funny. Roseanne, same thing. It didn't matter what was happening in the children's lives. Roseanne flipped it and made it all about her all of the time. Home Improvement. Um, Tim the Toolman Taylor is a man child, so he truly never grew up, and I don't know, just kind of gross and bothers me. Actually, everybody loves Raymond. Raymond has good qualities, but also he never grew up in many ways, and so because of that, his wife Deborah is just always put out and doesn't seem to they don't seem to even like each other. So that's interesting. Um, Also grew up with the Cosby Show, the Brady Show. Um, I'm sure you've watched those shows. It's interesting now to go back and watch and think, oh, okay, so I see what Cliff and Claire Huxtable did right then. What do we think about that? Would we have handled that differently, uh, and just kind of watching with new and fresh eyes. Also, what's interesting is to watch parenting play out in reality TV, such as John and Kate plus eight. Um, I absolutely, my children when they were little, John and Kate plus eight, along with 19 Kids and Counting, the Duggar Family, were on because TLC programming was just on in our house. At the time, here and there, I could hear some things and see things and think, that's a little weird, or that's not a good idea, or Kate actually sounds really mean right now. Yet I let it happen. Um, so I don't know. I probably contributed to the problems there, but it was fun at the time to watch the cute kids, and it seemed um at the time, it seemed bland. It seemed rated G, and that it would be okay to have on in the background when my kids were playing cars and that kind of stuff. It was interesting enough to keep their interest and interesting enough for me to have on. So I did have that on in the background. Now, what we know about children being raised on TV and just how unhealthy it is. I guess I'm a little ashamed that I contributed to those problems. Um, Watching some other shows that you wouldn't think are about families and things. Friends, Monica's parents, the Gellers. When the Gellers are on screen, some of the things they say and do, and how they pit Monica and oh gosh, what's David Schwimmer's Ross? They pit Monica and Ross against each other is really interesting for me to watch now with older eyes. The Gilmore Girls. So I've spoken about the Gilmore Girls before. So we watched, I guess, in our home the first three seasons with my youngest. She's 14 right now. And then once Rory went off to college, it turned a little beyond PG-13-ish, and I just didn't want to have it on anymore. So she very well could be watching it herself on Netflix, and that's fine. But I was uncomfortable enough that I didn't really want to watch some of those things with her. There's some really interesting parenting that happens on the Gilmore Girls. So obviously Lorelai had Rory at a very young age. She was 16. And so as the show is airing, Lorelai is 32 and Rory is 16. Lorelai never adulted properly because she was thrown into parenthood. And then her own mom, Emily Gilmore, is really kind of a textbook narcissist. And so it's really interesting to watch that play out. The word narcissism gets thrown around an awful lot online, and especially children like to use that term to describe their parents, for lack of a better term. I'm now have read so much about it and worked with so many different people who have different shades of things that when I say classic narcissist, what's fun about Emily is she was written by writers in a writer's room. So we only see the side that they are portraying to us. And she's definitely a flawed character. I think of narcissism as being kind of spectrumy, in that some people have traits of narcissism, but they still exhibit empathy and don't immediately turn absolutely everything all about them. Most people have a large spectrum of different personalities with them. For Lorelai, if we're looking at the two between emotional parents, driven parents, passive parents, rejecting parents, within those types, there's lots of parentification. So Lorelai asked Rory often to help take care of her and meet her emotional needs, which is not appropriate. Parents should not be using their children as therapists or as confidants or or put the emotional burden of you are now my new best friend and have to fulfill my emotional needs. No, have your emotional needs met by someone who is not your offspring. That's not why kids were brought into this world. Okay, let's see. I've got some notes here. I want to make sure that I've hit them all. Yeah. Well, another thing I want to point out is the cutting off parents and the going no contact or low contact or very low contact. It is kind of a an American thing, and I'm going to use that for lack of a better idea and term, and that is because I am an American, and we have this very strong independent streak and pioneerism, and our country was founded on the idea that no one's going to tell us what to do. We're going to just leave and go make our new country, and we do have this kind of independent pioneering streak about us that other cultures do not. Other cultures really cherish older generations and take them in and kind of revere them. And American society does not to the same extent. We are such a massive melting pot that there are lots of different mixes and cultures within our country. So again, I'm painting with very, very broad brushstrokes here. Another thing, though, that typically American culture does not do that other cultures do is the parents don't hand over the reins at a certain time and let the adult children now take over. So if you're in your 40s and 50s and your parents are still alive and your parents are still calling the shots on your life, pay attention to that. You don't have to run your decisions by your parents anymore. Once you have a family of your own, you don't have to be scared of them. You don't have to be worried or fearful that you're about to get in trouble. If you are financially free, you don't need your parents. That said, they may demand an awful lot from you, and it can be probably because they are fearful of their own aging and are worried that if they don't make these strong demands on you, you're not going to take care of them. And so having some really nice, deep, frank conversations with them and perhaps healing the past and letting them know that, Mom, I am going to take you to your doctor's appointments and I am going to help you do things around the house, but you no longer can tell me what to do. You have to trust that I know what I'm doing and that you raised me right. And it's time for you and your ideas and decision-making process to take the back seat and let me take over now. Yes, I will take care of you, but I'm going to take care of you in the way that I think is correct. So I think that is just really something to pay attention to. And especially as parents age and you're kind of stuck in that sandwich generation where your parents need you and you're still trying to raise your children. And because I'm speaking to you and I love you unconditionally, and I think you are amazing and wonderful and kind, I would like for you to protect yourself. And so if that means that you need to perhaps have some really frank conversations with your own parents about overstepping boundaries and being still a little too demanding and a little too pushy in your life, pay attention to that. It's funny. I was joking, yet I realized that there was some truth to it. With a child, a little girl had some stripes in her hair, and they were beautiful and they were lovely. And I said something like, "Oh, should Mrs. O'Day get some stripes in her hair? Should I dye the tips of my hair blue or purple?" She goes, yes, you should do it. I said, "Okay, I will." And then the second thing I said was, "But I need to check with my mom because I don't want her to get mad." And and so that's just really interesting that many of us still grow up worried that if we misstep, even if we have a career of our own and a life of our own and a family of our own, but we still have that kind of fearful thought that, oh, my mom's going to get mad at me after a certain age and after you've already proven yourself. Pay attention to that. Okay. All right. So we unpacked an awful lot here. What is your big takeaway? How do you keep your children from becoming estranged from you? Conversation, dialogue, humility, being humble enough to apologize deeply without making excuses, and maybe really working on yourself. If you're listening to this podcast, there are now 152 other episodes to go back and listen to. Learn, be open-minded, and be humble enough to acknowledge mistakes you've made and own them, and then try to make them right. Okay, pretty people. As always, I think you're amazing and wonderful and lovely. You're having a great hair and butt day. I am super proud of you. And I'll see you again next time. Do you have a slow living story to share? Leave me a voicemail at stephanieoday.com/podcast with any questions, comments, feedback, or testimonials, and I will be sure to include it in an upcoming episode. Also, if you found value in this episode, please share it with your family and friends and subscribe through your favorite podcast provider. The more you share, comment, and leave positive reviews, the more people we can reach and share the slow living lifestyle and messaging. Thank you, Slow Down Society, and have an absolutely wonderful day.